the vendor teams are incorporating artificial intelligence into their own sourcing and negotiation methodologies. They're ahead of the curve as far as leveraging that technology to proactively prepare their teams for these sourcing events and for these negotiations. So it is a game changer that if you're not on the buy side taking similar action to enhance your understanding of their pricing, their packaging, but then also how they are approaching you as a customer or as a prospective customer, you're going to be clearly at a disadvantage.
Welcome to Insights for IT Negotiations, a podcast by UpperEdge, a leading IT sourcing, negotiation, and project execution advisory firm. I'm John Belden, UpperEdge's Chief Research and Strategy Officer.
And I'm Kylie Chisholm, UpperEdge's Marketing Manager. Join us every other week as we share insights to help you maximize the value of your key IT relationships. In each episode, we'll delve into the topics that matter most to IT decision makers and sourcing professionals.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Insights for IT Negotiations podcast. My name is Kylie. I am UpperEdge's Content Marketing Manager. I am joined by my co-host, John. He is our Chief of Strategy and Research. John, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fabulous today, Kylie. Fabulous.
That's good to hear. We have a very special episode ahead of us. We are joined by UpperEdge's CEO, David Blake. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing well. I don't know if I'd say I'm fabulous, but I'm doing well. John always uses fabulous, so I can't steal it from him. So, but I'm glad to be here. Grateful for the opportunity to talk about this.
Awesome. Well, I will pass the torch to John. We're going to be talking today about the role of a modern third-party advisor in the age of AI. So I know John has a lot of really interesting topics and questions to dive into. So John, without further ado.
Yeah, and Dave, once again, really thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. You know, what sparked our interest in this whole discussion was the blog that you put out about the modern day the modern day TPA and just trying to bring to life, if you will, some of the points that you made in that blog. So let me just start with a really simple question, right? What is a third-party advisor? What is a TPA?
Yeah. I mean, a TPA is in essence, a third-party advisor. I like to call them more trusted advisors. And when you think about them, they should be independent advisors that support your organization in the sourcing and negotiation of what are some of your bigger stake, higher stake IT supplier relationships.
Yeah, you mentioned something, Dave, there about independence. Right? Why is independence so important for a TPA?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about bringing someone to the table that can support you in an unbiased manner, right? And again, the key word I used earlier is these are high stake, right? I'm certainly not advocating that organizations use trusted advisors for some of your smaller non-mission critical types of relationships. These are your most important relationships that you're looking to obtain the most value from. So the level of independence ensures that the advisor is focused 100% on driving the best outcome holistically for your business. And, if I'm being very candid, I've been in this industry for over 25 years. There are advisors out there that receive money from the same suppliers that they're advising on. And that has the opportunity for bias. That has the opportunity for coaching on both sides of the transaction. So independence is a key part. It's a key part of ensuring that your best interests are being taken care of.
And from an UpperEdge perspective, you would identify that as one of our key differentiators when we're talking to clients.
I mean, it is our key differentiator. We've been in business for 15 years. We've never taken money from any suppliers. I mean, we certainly will take the opportunity to have suppliers brief us if they want to make us aware of, unique situations, unique things they're rolling out. But we have never taken money, and that's purposeful because we want to make sure that myself, my organization, my teams are never being influenced by those external suppliers.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit about the landscape now and how it's changing. One of the things that we've done a lot of writing about at UpperEdge is the impact of generative AI and generative AI in general, right? I mean, from your perspective, how is generative AI changing the landscape for third-party advisors?
Well, it's changing the landscape in a multitude of ways, right? Number one, the vendors out there, particularly the software providers and certainly the IT service providers, are all incorporating artificial intelligence, large language models into their products and into their services. So there is a component of how they incorporate those services, that functionality into their products and services that requires different pricing mechanisms, different pricing metrics, bundling, which ultimately enhances the complexity of the transactions that our customer teams need to negotiate. So there's that component on that side of it, but then there's also the component that the vendor teams are incorporating artificial intelligence into their own sourcing and negotiation methodologies. They're ahead of the curve as far as leveraging that technology to proactively prepare their teams for these sourcing events and for these negotiations. So it is a game changer that if you're not on the buy side taking similar action to enhance your understanding of their pricing, their packaging, but then also how they are approaching you as a customer or as a prospective customer, you're going to be clearly at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and when you say if you're on the buy side and you're not taking advantage of these safe capabilities, to me that means you don't have to necessarily put those capabilities in place at your company, but you should be utilizing a TPA that has those same capabilities to be able to, let's call it, defend, right, against what the vendor's using.
You can. I mean, I may slightly disagree with you a little bit there, John, in the sense that I do think internal organizations should be leveraging AI capabilities to help them better prepare for their sourcing, their negotiation events. But when you hearken back to those high stake, enterprise critical, mission critical relationships, at the end of the day, you need to be leveraging a TPA that has the market intelligence, the deal data, the business intelligence on how those suppliers operate, what motivates them, what moves them, and leverage the artificial intelligence capabilities and the benchmarks and insights of that TPA, right? There's still going to always be a complementary need for those types of services for those bigger, higher stake, critical relationships.
Dave, can you we're thinking about advantages and disadvantages a little bit more. Can you drill a little bit deeper in terms of what disadvantages a client might have going up against a fully armed, let's call it, and I'm going to say an Accenture or an SAP or a Deloitte, somebody who's got those tools and understands those buying behaviors.
Yeah. So number one, they have the power and the insights of the thousands of deals and transactions that they've done, right? And they can leverage that data within their own artificial intelligence enabled models, right? To do a couple of things, right? They can do scenario building for presenting proposals to that supplier. And, I like to use the term triangulation. Let me build three scenarios that I will present to the supplier, but I can train and ask my models to say, okay, give me three models that will direct the prospective customer or existing customer to the deal that I want. Okay. And I'm presenting, in essence, the lesser of three evils in the three deals that I present. And it also can help me do behavioral analysis on how the client will react to those three particular deals. And I leverage those insights that tool is presenting to me to already proactively, before I'm even going into negotiations, understand how I can tactically and strategically address the pushback that may be presented on all three of those particular scenarios, right? So if I have done all that work through the tools and the capabilities that I've built in-house, I am so far more well prepared. I'm so far ahead of what the customer's reaction time is going to be and how they're prepared to address the items that I present to them.
One of the other disadvantages I think that if you could speak about that, I think we're beginning to see is the whole notion of AI being introduced and embedded into products now. right, that are going to clients, and how the vendors are actually pricing those embedded AI capabilities. There isn't a lot of standards, I don't think, within the marketplace that I suspect, right? Clients are at a disadvantage of even understanding what it is that is being priced and how it impacts them.
No, they're at a huge disadvantage, and I liken the depiction of the pricing models in the AI space to the customers as a little bit of the wild, wild west, right? The vendors are still trying to figure this out, but they have, a primary objective is, okay, how do I maximize the revenue and the profitability that I can extract from these different components? And how do I get penetration of these products out into the market, right? Ultimately, I want customers using my AI enabled products to gain insights from them. The disadvantage to the clients is it's constantly evolving. The structures aren't necessarily practical for the way that the customers want to deploy the business, and the challenge is they don't necessarily know how to push back on those different models, because the providers are making it appear as though these are standard de facto models that are proven and adopted throughout the marketplace, and they're not. So you need, in that situation, an understanding and perhaps a trusted advisor who can bring insights to you as to how to practically push back on those structures and get the providers to maybe alter or modify their structures so that they're more adaptive to how your business is evolving.
Well, I mean, that's a really good lead into my next question, Dave, because I was just going to ask you, what does a modern TPA bring to the table, right, in order to be able to actually solve those problems, or at least give the level the playing field, as I know you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to say a modern TPA, there's a lot that I'll probably touch on here, and I'll try and do it quickly. So, number one, a modern TPA has to have an understanding of how the suppliers are using AI within their products and services, number one, how they're packaging, how they're pricing them, kind of what their future roadmap is for those products and solutions, and the pricing constructs around them. Number two, they need to understand how that supplier is leveraging AI in their sourcing and negotiation strategies. Are they using them in their proposal builds out? Are they using them in how they stage their responses, how they prepare for their negotiations? Because that ultimately impacts the kind of stagecraft and approach that customer takes back. And then some of these other ones are less AI dependent, but you ultimately want an advisor who looks at what you're trying to accomplish with your supply base as holistic. I think too many people have assessed advisors out there as just price focused, trying to get you the best price. And I think that's, not the right way to look at it. You want someone who's looking at it holistically, looking at it as, how can I structure this relationship so that my business is realizing the most value from this relationship? And that entails many things. That entails how your relationship is structured, how your agreement's structured, how the construct is structured from a pricing perspective. And, there's been plenty of customers out there that have pressed too hard on vendors where the relationship doesn't work. And then there's others who haven't pressed enough, where they're taking advantage for many years and they're not seeing the value they deserve.
We talked a little bit about selection of a TPA. As we think about that selection of a TPA, what are the criteria that clients should use? Or maybe put a different way, what mistakes do you actually think that they might be making in the selection of a TPA as they go out to market?
So the first mistake, I'll say, is a judgment call, right? And that's the judgment as to when to use a TPA, right? So I think there's plenty of instances where companies internally make a decision not to use a TPA on a particular sourcing initiative or negotiation, and it's not the right one to say you're going it alone, right? That's a judgment call, and I think that's a mistake. And what I would advise people is, you can have conversations with TPAs where you're not exchanging money, doing any kind of arrangement, and you use that engagement to determine whether or not there is a value proposition for using them in that particular service. But when you get to a place where you want assistance and you want help, I think you need someone who is that definition of that modern TPA that we talked about earlier, someone who does have a deep understanding of AI products and services being utilized by the supply base. You have an understanding of how they're employing it in their sourcing and negotiation efforts. And then, you also want a TPA who's integrated artificial intelligence into their own methodologies and their own capabilities for doing their homework, preparing their insights, and preparing you as a client, right? It allows them to be that much more reactive and proactive in how they guide you throughout that particular transaction or event.
Did you know that UpperEdge offers subscription advisory services? This on-demand solution provides essential benchmarks and market insights specific to your business needs precisely when you need it, empowering you and your team to make informed decisions for your IT initiatives. Position your team for success. Reach out today via the link in the show notes to learn more.
One of the things that we get asked a lot, Dave, and I'm sure you get asked a lot more than I do, right? Well, do you guys have benchmarks? And, maybe you just give us the benchmarks and we'll go off and do our own negotiation. Now, I know we've got an opinion about benchmarks, but can you talk a little bit about maybe why benchmarks are not enough anymore?
Yeah, 100%. So, I get that asked a lot. I get it asked a lot in sales cycles. I love the question, and I also don't like the question, right? Because I think it goes back to my comment earlier that sometimes I think the market has a perception that TPAs just help you get a better price, right? The benchmarks are important. It's important that you have a TPA who has relevant benchmarks, accurate benchmarks, precise benchmarks, but they are not the end all be all, right? They are a part of the solution. And, I've always advised prospective customers, I said, listen, I can give you all the benchmarks, the most precise benchmarks for your particular situation. But if you do not employ the right communication approach, negotiation approach with your particular supplier, and you don't evaluate your leverage and strategize about how you can manufacture leverage in that situation, you are not guaranteed at all to capture the type of deal framework and deal that you should get. So, in my own opinion, right, benchmarks are super important, but I think the stagecraft, the strategy, how you manufacture leverage to get what you want in these particular deals is probably the most important thing, and it's probably the most undervalued and underlooked item.
One of the things that we've talked about, and you certainly mentioned it within the blog, is it's selecting the TPA is a leadership decision, right? It's not necessarily a procurement decision or something like that. Can you expand a little bit on this whole concept of selecting a TPA being a leadership decision?
Yeah, 100%. Again, and some of my commentary could come across as self-serving, right? Which, people can make their assessment of whether it is, but I truly and sincerely believe this. Leveraging TPAs in select moments is a strategic capability that you can bring to your organization. And again, it goes back to the judgment call. You got to pick the right ones. And I think it is a leadership area that if you truly focus on, say, 10 to 15% of your supply base, right, that delivers the most value for your business, you need to make sure that you're structuring those arrangements, structuring those relationships so that they are delivering the maximum value to you. That can't be, you can't have anything more strategic than making sure that the 10 to 15% of your suppliers that deliver most of your capabilities within your IT function, your business function, you got to get those right. So how can it not be strategic, right? And I think if you look at it beyond just the price component, that's where the strategic nature comes in, right? I want agreements and relationships that are scalable, agile, flexible, that grow with my business and that help evolve. And those are where you really get the win-win type of constructs.
Yeah, and when we talk about value itself, I think we have to make sure that there's a distinguish between what the value is that I'll call it the supplier is providing you, as well as what is the value that the supplier is enabling your organization to ultimately deliver to your customers, right? Because they can be providing tons of value, but if it sits on the shelf, like in a software deal, right? You could have the greatest deal and it could be really, I'll call it considered valuable. But if all of that stuff sits on the shelf, was it really truly valuable to that organization? I think that's one of the things as well that a TPA needs to help their clients think through.
100%. And that goes to that holistic four corners of the relationship type of scenario. Again, if you're just thinking about the price, you're not thinking about, okay, can I structure a relationship? Can I negotiate into the governance structure of my supplier relationship, activities, investments from the supplier that are going to help my business leverage the capabilities that I bought. To your point, if I buy it and it just sits there, the supplier could say, well, that's your fault. You didn't, deploy it. You didn't push it and roll it out. Well, if I really are focused on these 10 to 15% strategic relationships, I want a partner who is chiming in throughout our governance interaction and saying, Dave, you've got this capability. You paid for it. Let us help you figure out how to roll this out, deploy it, and get the most value from it. And, it sounds idealistic, but we know from some of our client relationships, those exist and they're real and people have them. It's the ones that they've kind of let their relationships die on the vine and they never had those parameters structured in their agreements from start that are losing value.
Yeah. So let's take this opportunity, Dave, and think about wrapping it up. I'm going to give you your chance right now. Here, your elevator, I'm going to give you the elevator pitch now, right? You've got the opportunity. You're in the elevator with the CEO of a Fortune 1000 company. You got 2 minutes, right? Make your pitch for why they need a TPA and why UpperEdge is that right company.
Well, number one, you need a TPA specifically for those 10 to 15% of your relationships that are delivering the most stability and the most value to your business. Number one, those are your most mission critical, right? And when those things don't go well or when they go sideways, you're losing tremendous value. There's value leakage there. So one, you need an advisor who can come in and help you from a strategic relationship vision perspective, negotiate those from the four corners of the relationship to deliver the absolute utmost value. And again, it's complementary in nature to your team. So a true trusted advisor is that. They're an advisor. They are not displacing your sourcing and negotiation function. They are complementing your sourcing and negotiation function with precise market intelligence, precise insights, benchmarks, and then as we talked about earlier, the stagecraft, right? We have the opportunity to understand those supplier business practices far more in advance than your teams do because your teams have to study thousands of vendors and negotiate with thousands of vendors. We're focused on those top to 15%. So in that scenario, right, you're getting the empowered insights to make really good decisions and change the constructs of those relationships.
So if I can say this back to you, just make sure that I got the message. 20% of your IT suppliers deliver 80% of the value to your organization. You want to have a TPA to come in to maximize the 80% of that value.
And 100%. Yeah.
Right. And the TPAs, the cost of a TPA is going to be, marginal associated with that 80% of the value in terms of what
marginal. It's a tiny fraction. And again, I probably shouldn't even say this because I don't want to offend anyone, but the biggest thing I see at times are just people's egos and pride get in the way of making a decision to leverage a TPA. And again, I am fully advocating that you should pressure test your TPAs for your unique situations to unequivocally see and understand there's a value proposition for third-party assistance. But in a lot of cases, you never even get there because ego or pride gets in the way of thinking, well, I have these IT members, I have these procurement members, these vendor members, their job is to source and negotiate. It absolutely is. But when you really look at the thousands of deals that the suppliers have underneath their arms, you look at the fact that they're enabling their sourcing and negotiation processes with very powerful large language models, AI capabilities founded on tons and tons of data, you're at a disadvantage. You cannot be at a disadvantage for your most strategic relationships.
Yeah, you're gonna renegotiate your Microsoft deal once every 3 years, right?
Yep,
They're
exactly.
they're gonna negotiate those your sales guy for that Microsoft is gonna renegotiate 20 deals this year.
Yep. And again, John, just to add is, you talked about the TPA of tomorrow, right? That's another area where I think clients, they do a disservice to themselves. They look at a Microsoft. You brought up Microsoft, right? They could be spending 15 million per annum with Microsoft, and they're like, well, we've been with Microsoft for the past 15 years. We have no leverage. There's nothing we can negotiate. That's a misnomer as well. You can always negotiate, or maybe some cases you can't. But again, put that before the TPA, make them quantify, show you the value, show you how you can capture it. Because again, strong TPAs that are leveraging good data, precise data, and are AI enabled themselves are able to run through scenarios, manufacture leverage, and build out scenarios where we can say, you know what, if we run this renewal negotiation with Microsoft in this way, leverage these conditioning and positioning points, because we understand what's important to Microsoft, we can gain value through this negotiation.
Right, and we have done that in big multiples on our fees.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, there's so many sole source negotiations that we've done where, when you step back and look at what was achieved, you can be a little surprised, right? Because you go into the situation, the client goes into the situation thinking we don't have any leverage. There's always ways to manufacture leverage. And that, again, is, where a very strong strategic, critical thinking advisory team can come in and say, okay, we can manufacture leverage in these scenarios.
Yeah, Dave, well, I really appreciate, we'll wrap it up here, but I really appreciate you taking the time today. I know your schedule's busy. I think this is going to make for a great podcast. And once again, I do want to thank you for taking the time today.
No, I appreciate it. It was fun. Kylie, I think if I do another one, I want to get one of those microphones that I see hanging down from the real podcasters out there. So maybe I'll try it for another one that we do.
Dave, those are fake, right?
I didn't know that.
We can AI that in. We can generate that.
Very good.
But yes, thank you, Dave, for joining us on the episode today. That was a really insightful conversation. I think a really important conversation at this time. We'll have that blog that John mentioned at the beginning of the episode in the show notes, as well as our contact us information, so that way you can reach out to UpperEdge if you are ready to work with a strategic third-party advisor. And with that, we will chat with everyone in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Insights for IT Negotiations. This episode was hosted by John Belden and Kylie Chisholm and produced by Mike Brown. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss a new episode. For more information on IT sourcing and risk management strategies, visit UpperEdge.com and subscribe to our monthly UpperEdge newsletter. Thank you for listening.